rolling on steel pan. It's not exactly something that we're taught as steel panists. It's something that we tend to learn by ourselves. Our instructor would say, hey, hold this note, roll this note, and we would roll it. But just because they're not taught the same way that scales or songs are taught on steel pan does not mean that there isn't a technique to it. There are specific things that you have to consider and take into account when you're rolling to make sure that your roll sounds pleasant to the ear as you're playing it. So that's what this video is for. This video is for persons that either want to refine their rolling technique or persons that want to fix how they roll or change how they roll entirely. So that brings the question, what is a roll? When you sing, you can create one clear sustained pitch. But because steel pan isn't an instrument that can maintain pitch in that way, like how saxophones or woodwind instruments in general can sustain one pitch for long periods of time, us steel panists had to find a way to imitate that sustained pitch on our instrument. And the way we do that is by rolling. So when you're rolling, you're alternating between your two hands. You're doing it quickly so that you can create the illusion or the appearance of one sustained pitch. So when we're rolling, we're trying to get as close to creating that reliable, consistent, sustained pitch that you would get when you're singing. So that means that there's certain things that we have to pay attention to, and there's certain things that we have to avoid as we're playing. We're going to have to get rid of any gaps in our technique that would infringe on and impede us from creating that sustained pitch, that sustained tone on the pan. Let's go through a few of those things that you have to keep in mind. First off, we have not holding the sticks properly and not striking the pan properly. If your stick is moving around a lot as you're playing, it's going to kill the consistency of your sound. If you're holding it in a way that's going to prevent the stick from moving naturally, that's going to prevent you from having the tone that you want on your steel pan as well. So you want to hold the sticks in a way that you get the same exact sound as you're playing the instrument. I already did an in-depth video on holding the sticks and striking the pan. If you want to focus on that, if you realize that you're not doing that properly, you can check that out. But just a quick summary, here are the important things that you have to keep in mind. First off, you have to make sure your index finger and thumb are right next to each other. You should be able to wiggle the pan stick in between your fingers. Next, you have to make sure you have a firm but loose grip on the stick. It shouldn't be waggling around in your hands as you're playing. It should be firm enough to be kept in place, but loose enough that it's not stiffened to the point where you can't give it any momentum. And lastly, when you're striking the pan, you have to make sure you don't use your arm, but you use your wrist. Of course, again, if you want to go into that some more, you can check out the previous video. There's also having uneven spaces between each strike. In order to imitate that consistent and sustained pitch in the voice, we have to make sure that when we strike the pan, there is an even amount of space between the first and second strike, between the second and third strike, between the third and fourth strike, and so on and so forth. It should be a case where you're hitting the steel pan at a consistent tempo. There are some persons that would end up staggering the way that they play so that there's a really small space in between the first two, then a really big pause, and then a really small space in between the third and fourth, and so on. And as a result, you get a staggered sound as you're rolling. So make sure that when you're rolling, you have even spaces in between each strike of the steel pan. The best way to do that is to practice rolling slowly so that you can keep yourself accountable. It's going to be a lot easier to hear when you're being uneven when you're rolling slowly as opposed to rolling faster. We're going to get more into that in a little bit. We're not going to touch that right now. After that, this one is really important. Striking the pan at different volumes with each hand. Experienced steel panists can quickly tell whether or not a newcomer is left or right-handed simply because of the way that they play the instrument. And one of those ways is by seeing which hand is hitting the pan louder as you're rolling. You can check to see if you're doing this by recording yourself doing a roll, and if you hear something that sounds like gang 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 gang, where one strike is way louder, one strike is way softer, then you know that you're using one hand to strike a lot louder than the other, and that one hand tends to be your dominant hand. So make sure to practice striking the pan with the same volume regardless as to which hand is hitting the pan. Sometimes persons speed up their rolls and then slow them back down, especially if they're rolling for long periods of time. Again, don't forget, we want that even, sustained tone. So if you speed up and slow down, that's going to ruin the consistency. It's no longer sustained, it's just really wavy and inconsistent. I know persons that don't roll the fastest, they have a more rhythmic roll, but because they've taken care of all of the gaps that would prevent that sustained pitch, as they slow down, you can still have a clear idea as to what they're trying to do, and the imitation still holds up, even though they're not rolling as quickly. To summarize, you're going to keep these 4 things in mind: holding the stick and striking the pan properly, making sure that you have even spaces between each strike, making sure that each hand is striking as loud as the other hand, and making sure that you don't speed up or slow down as you're playing. Being aware of those things is the first step towards fixing the problem, and oftentimes that awareness by itself is enough for persons to fix their technique. But if you think that you want to focus in and make sure that your rolls are 100% perfect, then we can go on to know practicing rolling. These are the things you can do to practice rolling so that you can get the consistent, sustained pitch that we're going for. The first one, start off slow. We talked about this already earlier. There are a lot of things that you have to pay attention to as you're rolling, especially if you're more of a beginner, especially if you haven't put that much time into rolling properly. You're going to have to think about a lot. So that means that you have to give yourself the time to think. You need to slow down and play each note really, really slowly so that you can see yourself doing it, so that you can see firsthand and see clearly whatever inaccuracies or whatever you're doing incorrectly, and then you'd be able to fix them with that knowledge. When you do it slowly, just make sure that each strike of the pan sounds the exact same, has even spaces between them. After you're comfortable rolling slowly, you're going to slowly but surely over time speed up and make sure that you're maintaining that consistency. If at any point you see yourself making mistakes, if you see yourself rolling too loudly with one hand, if you see yourself slowing down and speeding up as you're rolling, then slow back down. Do it at a slower tempo, get comfortable there again, and then speed back up. What you can also do that's going to help you is rolling at different volumes. You can practice rolling very softly. You can practice rolling very loudly. Doing that is going to help you with your tone as well, and it's going to make you more versatile if you have more dynamics in the music that you're playing. Once you can roll softly and roll loudly and maintain the same consistency, that's also going to be very beneficial for you. Lastly, you should also practice on different notes on your pan, especially if you're playing something like double tenor, double seconds, cellos, anything other than tenor pan, which has larger notes that are further away. You're going to have to adjust your approach as you're striking for each note. Sometimes you're going to have to tilt your hand slightly. Sometimes you're going to have to move your hand over to a different pan, and it's going to affect how loudly or how softly one of these hands are playing as a result. So take time to understand your instrument. Take time to go through each individual note. The smaller notes tend to need a lot more force to get the same sound as the larger notes as well. Just take time to understand your pan. Each pan is unique. And once you do that, once you practice consistency for, let's say, just 10 minutes a day for a few weeks, eventually your rolls are going to become more consistent, more reliable. They're going to sound better in your day-to-day playing. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that was beneficial to you. Thank you to Seth for sharing his thoughts as to what he wanted to learn. If you have any comments or queries in regards to Steelpan, please leave them in the comment section below. I'll make sure to either comment, respond to you, answering the question, or I may turn that question into an entire new video. So make sure to leave something down in the comments and I'll make sure to respond to it. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed and enjoy your day.